Hello and welcome to this video tutorial from BlenderCookie.com. My name is Jonathan Williamson, and today, in spirit of the upcoming holiday, we're going to be looking at how to model a set of Christmas lights. The way that we're going to be doing this is by using an array modifier to replicate a section of the lights along a path for as long as we want, and then having created a start and end cap, which in this case will be electrical plugs, give us one complete strand of lights that we will be able to manipulate any way that we want for any kind of scene that we wish. This is fairly easy to set up, and it works much the same way that some of you may have seen the extendable chain model that we released a few weeks ago. And we're going to be using much the same technique, but there's going to be obviously a lot more modeling involved, and so that will be the primary focus of this tutorial. So let's just go ahead and get started. We're going to be doing this in Blender 2.5 Alpha 0, as all we need to do are some simple modeling tasks, an array modifier, spin, etc. So I want to start by going into side view with my default cube, and then switch off perspective mode by 5 on your number pad. And then let's just zoom in here on our default cube, and we're going to hit tab to go into edit mode, and then hit X and delete vertices. We just want to delete everything. And then we can hit spacebar and type in plane to add a plane, which we can then hit R and Y to rotate along the Y-axis 90 degrees by typing in 90 on your number pad and hit enter. And then what we want to do is go ahead and hit G to grab it and move it up just so we've got 1/10 of a Blender unit below and to the right of the center point. The reason that we're going to be doing this is since Christmas lights are composed of two different wires, then with the actual bulbs separating the one wire at increments, we're going to be using a subsurf modifier, so if we placed our plane right here, because this is one subsurfed will be our circle for the wire, one subsurf there would be too much of a gap between the two. And I'll show this more once we actually get to it, but go ahead and just take my word for it that we want to go ahead and move this off center a little bit. And then what we want to do now is we don't want this face in here because otherwise it's going to be extruded along each segment. So we want to just hit X and delete only faces, such that we're left with just 4 edges. Now what we can do is go ahead and hit Shift D and then just rotate it around, but first hit period on your keyboard and rotate it around 180 degrees around the cursor, such that you have 2 planes or 2 sets of edges that are, I guess you would say, perpendicular to each other, or perhaps parallel. And what we're now going to do is extrude this from the front view by going to 1 on your number pad, and we want to select everything. So in this case, we'll hit A twice, and then we're going to extrude it out to 1 unit. So we'll just hit E to extrude, and extrude out. Or actually, I guess that would be 10 units in this case. We will be scaling everything down since currently these are in Blender units are very, very large, but we're going to model everything close here, and then we'll scale it all down. So now we have our 2 wires, but at this point we want to go ahead and twist this such that we have a twisted wire. And the easiest way to do this, what we're going to do is first add a loop cut to each one of these, which we can do by hit Control R, left click, which then activates edge slide, so at that point just right click. In 2.49, you would have just middle clicked to place it in the center. This has not yet been implemented in 2.5, so you kind of get around that by right clicking. So we'll do that on both of them. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on my back face culling just so that we can see, or we don't see through the mesh, and just kind of cleans up our view a little bit. And then I'm also going to hit N on my keyboard to bring up the properties panel, and we're just going to turn off the grid floor just again to clean up our display a little. And then we can hit N again to toggle back. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we want to go into wireframe mode. Since we turned on the background occlusion, we can't, when in face mode, you can't select the background vertices. And so in wireframe mode, we can. And we're going to hit B to box select and left click and drag over the 2 right sets. And then from side view, we're going to hit R to rotate and then type in 90 degrees. So it's 90 on your keypad. This then will have rotated this whole section around, but we actually need to rotate these 2 back, which you can select those by hitting Alt right click, and actually Alt Shift right click to select 2 of them. And then from side view again, we're just going to hit R and -45. There we are. So now we have what's going to be a twisted set of wires. So at this point, we're going to go over to our modifiers panel and add an array modifier. which then is set to a constant offset of 1, which is fine. There we go. Now, if we just raise this count, you can see it's constantly increasing. But we have a problem in that it's not being rotated around. And so what we're going to do to fix this is we're actually going to add an empty. So we can just hit spacebar and add empty. Oops. Actually, it's in 2.5, it's just called object. So add the object. And then just so that we can see it better, I'm going to go ahead and go into the display properties of the empty and just turn the size up to 10. That won't affect the scale of the object. It'll only affect the displayed size. As if you mess with the scale, it can have some effects with the modifier and such. So now what we want to do on this modifier, going back to the modifiers panel, is we're going to change the relative offset to an object offset. And you can just click on this field and select the empty here. Now, when we grab this empty, first off, watch and you'll notice that it sets the offset of the array based on the location of the empty. Okay, well that's cool. So we can just move it over 1 or 10 units and it'll be correctly positioned. But now we can also rotate it. So if we rotate, say, 90 degrees from the side, it now lines up perfectly. And it will apply the same amount of rotation to each step, such that if we raise this count, you can see each one is continuously being applied, giving us our twisted wires. So this is very, very cool. Okay, at this point, I'm going to actually click apply. Oh, excuse me, nope. We got one other thing to do first. Actually, two things. First off, let's go ahead and add a subsurf modifier, because this will allow us to better demonstrate what we're going to do next. So subdivision surface, and let's just raise the subdivisions up to 2, and then over here, we're going to click shading smooth. And then you will notice we're getting nasty normals here, so if we just go into edit mode, select everything, and hit Control N, that will fix that real quick. Now, you'll notice that we have these seams here where the end vertices are not being merged. Well, in this case, we can just click merge on the on the modifier, and it will merge those together where it sees them. And you can adjust the distance here if they're not merging correctly. But if you model this correctly and got everything exact, which is why we're using the exact numerical values when rotating, then it should merge perfectly. Okay, excuse me. So what we're actually going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and apply this modifier. So now we have a real object. And I'm also going to add a mirror modifier, just for momentarily, because I'm actually going to apply it as well. And actually, no, that is actually incorrect. What I'm going to do instead is go into edit mode, select everything, hit Shift D, and then scale -1 along the cursor. And then we also need to do one more thing, and rotate it from the side view 180 degrees. Excuse me, 90 degrees. Maybe another 90. There we go. And, okay, you'll notice that I'm getting a little confused here because we need this continued along here. And so I'm actually going to mirror it once more, because since we scaled to -1, we actually mirrored the object, which says no matter how we rotate this, which I just forgot a step, we're never going to be able to get these to line up. It's always going to be coming around this way and then flip directions. And that's just because we mirrored the object. And so if we hit comma on our keyboard and hit S and -1, we can scale it to mirror it again. And then we'll rotate around the x-axis 90 degrees. And now it fits perfectly. At which point we're also going to select everything, hit W, remove doubles. Now, the reason that we did all this is because we now have basically one section that we'll be able to replicate real easily. Now, since we're not modeling from a direct reference or anything, you know, the spacing between the light bulbs that we're going to create may not be accurate, and of course that probably changes based on the bulbs themselves, and the strands that you get, but we're going to go ahead and just use this section, because more than anything, this is a demonstration, and if you needed to make this longer, not a problem. You could very easily add a second array now, whatever you needed to do. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go into edit mode, and we're going to actually select one of these areas, and we're going to separate it apart to add a light to it. And so I'm going to go ahead and just grab this section here, and we're going to just alt-right click on this loop, and then hit V to split it apart. At which point I want to hold down Control, and we're just going to move it over 1 unit. Then we're going to deselect it and select this side and move it over 1 unit. And then I'm going to rotate it around the y-axis 45 degrees and negative 45 degrees. Oops, rotate along the y, not the x. Okay, because this then allows us to select them, hit E to extrude, and take it up, and then we'll select them again, and rotate another 45, and negative 45, and you can see we maybe need to move these back one more. And what this is the split in the wire where the bulb is then going to latch on. And so at this point, let's go ahead and select these two, and we're going to hit Shift S, cursor to selection, and from the top view, we can hit spacebar, type in circle, add circle, and then immediately you can see we need to adjust the number of vertices, and let's just take it down to 8. Okay. And I want to actually go ahead and rotate this just such that my edges here are straight so that I can easily work with this further. Because one thing that you'll notice when you look at most Christmas lights is that the section right around where it latches onto the wires actually has a flat surface. And so rotating that will allow us to make that much easier. And so let's just scale this up until it's about a little larger than the wires. And then we're going to hit E to extrude, take it straight up, and the top of the plastic part of the bulb would be probably about there. And we're going to scale this up just slightly. And then what I want to do is go ahead and hit E to extrude. And we're just going to, using extrude, scale, move, etc., we're going to create a simple shape here that will represent our Christmas lights. We'll take that in. And then I'm going to also go ahead and add another loop here, another one there. And then we're going to select these two, hit E to extrude, scale, and Shift Z, so it only scales along the X and the Y, so I can just take it in evenly. And we're going to just take it in a little bit, and then we're going to do that one more time. And so this just kind of creates the ridge between these two. And again, I'm not working from a reference here, I'm just kind of working from memory. And since this is such a small item that you would see in most scenes, it's not like it needs to be absolutely exact. You know, in some cases it may need to be, but of course accuracy is always good regardless of what you're doing. But for this case, we're not going to worry about it too much. Okay, and so I'm just going to go ahead and continue modeling my shape here. I'm going to go ahead and extrude this down once. You'll notice that I'm putting in some controlling loops, such as I actually need to add one there. Got one here, and several others there that help sharpen up those edges. But again, since this is such a small object, we don't want to add too many simply because we're going to raise our polygon count to obscene levels since we are going to be raying this along a path. We could potentially have hundreds of these in a scene. Okay, now one thing I'm going to do here, even though it's not necessary, I do want to go ahead and show you it just because it does add a good bit of detail, and it's a nice thing to work with. And so what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and select these two vertices and these two vertices adjacent to it, hit F to create a face, and then we'll add in 2 loop cuts on it, and we're going to scale up along the x-axis like so. And then we're going to select these two areas, and actually I want to go into edge mode, so hit Control Tab and edges, select these 2 loops, and hit E to extrude and take them up. And what that does is create the holes for the wires to go through. Now you'll notice that it's a little oddly shaped right now, and that's okay. Because the next step that we're going to do is we're going to add in another loop right here, and another loop right here. And then we're going to select, I'm going to go ahead and hide, oh, never mind. I'm going to select this area and this area, do the same thing on the opposite side. Like this, because then I'm just going to hit S and Y to scale it in to about there to create that flat portion of the bulb that you would see. And you can see that at this point, maybe we want to go ahead and scale this along the x-axis a little more. We can maybe go ahead and take the wires out a little. You know, whatever you want to do at that point to make it fit your needs better. And we'll maybe go ahead and extrude these up once more. Okay, now let's just go ahead and create a very simple bulb. On the bulb here, I'm just going to go ahead and Shift D to duplicate this portion. Maybe scale down just a little bit. And then we're going to take this straight up and then straight in to a point, or almost to a point, at which point we're just going to hit Shift F to fill it. And maybe we'll add a little more interest in here by adding in a couple loops, scale it down. 2 loops up here, which we will scale and scale up to add that little bit of a tip that you often see on Christmas lights. There we go. And we'll just hit Set Smooth. And then we can see we need to go in and hit Control N for the normals as well. So that pretty much does it for the modeling section. And what we want to do now is go ahead and array this. Now, I do feel like maybe the entire thing is maybe not quite long enough. So let's go ahead and we're just going to duplicate this section over. So let's just grab this. And what we can use to reference this is because we need to be careful when we do anything in terms of changing the size, because this edge and this edge need to line up perfectly. And so you can see here, if we look at our center point, we have a short, a long, another short, or there we go. That's basically our center there. And so we want to just replicate that. So let's just grab this section here, Shift D. Oh, excuse me, missed one. Just move that over. And since I've done it all to the grid, it still fits perfectly. And so then we'll just select everything, W, remove doubles, and Control N to fix those normals. Okay, so we just add a little more length. Now what we're ready to do is go ahead and re-add our array modifier. So we'll just click Add Modifier and Array. And I want to be sure to move it above the subsurf modifier. The subsurf should always come last, since it will be... Oh, I applied the wrong modifier. There we are. The subsurf should always come last because it's going to be applying the subdivision to some of what's happening by the array modifier. Now you will notice that immediately this is looking good, but we want to go ahead and set the object offset again. So we'll set that to empty, and then we can just move this over until it lines up right there. And you can see we need to rotate this along the x-axis, say -90, make it line up. And then on the array, we're going to go ahead and turn on merge. Now, this is something that you will notice that we get another another normal problem. But if we go into edit mode and select everything and hit Control N, nothing happens. This is seemingly a problem. And the reason that I actually know what's going on here is because I tested this beforehand and came up with the exact same problem. And so we're going to go into edit mode, and I want to also hit N to bring up my properties and go down to, I guess it's not in, it's under the object buttons. And we want to turn off double-sided, if I can remember where it's at. Oh, maybe it is in here. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. It's underneath the object data. So we want to turn off double-sided here. And what you'll notice is that one of our wires has the wrong side facing out. Since if we turn off our array modifier here, you'll notice that the inside is gray and the outside is black, whereas it's the opposite on there. And yet if we select everything, hit Control N, nothing happens. Control Shift N, again, nothing happens. And so what we can do though is select it, and we want to, underneath the mesh tools, flip the direction of the normals. And that'll just solve that. And now you'll notice that with our array, it's now all fine and dandy. We'll close our properties, and we're going to keep going. So at this point, I'm going to be sure to go ahead and save this because I did actually lose my test file several times due to a crash in 2.5. And anything that you're doing in 2.5, you do need to be careful with. Just be aware that it's not necessarily as stable as you would like it to be. And so just be aware of that and save often. And I did not save often and redid the test, I think, 3 different times, but that's okay. So what we're going to do at this point is we want to add a curve to scale this along, such that we can change the shape any way we want. We can set the length to be dynamic based on the curve. But before we do that, let's go ahead and select our object and our empty and hit Shift-C to center the cursor and hit period to scale to the cursor. And then we're just going to scale it way down. Way, 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 way down. It can be, it really doesn't matter how much you go. We just want to, I'm going to actually just scale down till it fits about there. Just something that we'll be able to render within our scene without too much issue. And so what we're going to do now is go ahead and hit spacebar to add a curve. And in this case, I want a Bezier curve. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit R and X to rotate 90 degrees around the x-axis, just so that the arc on it is pointing up. And now I'm actually just going to go in and let's just real quickly extrude a simple shape. It's just using E and R and S to scale, rotate, extrude. And we're just going to create a nice curvy shape. It really doesn't have to be anything phenomenal. It can just be kind of whatever you want. And what this curve is going to do is it's going to define the length and the shape of our light strand here. And so now that we have our curve, let's just go into edit mode. And first off, note the name, which is in this case just curve. And we're going to grab our object, go back to the array, and we want to change this. Originally it was on fixed count, and we're going to change it over to fit curve. And then we need to just grab this and select curve. Okay, now you'll notice that something odd is happening here in that each array is scaling way, 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 way down. And this is not a good thing at all. And what it's because of, it's because we scaled our empty way down. And then that affected the array, because if you scale this, you'll notice that it scales the array as well. And so what we need to do on this is just hit Alt-S to clear the scale. And then you can, sometimes it won't update, so you can just tab in and out of edit mode on your mesh object to set that. So now, since this is huge now, we just go back over to the display properties and we'll just turn this down to 1. There we are. Now, with our array, what we want to do is go in and change the fit to curve, okay? But we also want to add another modifier to this. I'm just going to toggle this down. Add a curve modifier, and which we're also going to move above the subsurf by clicking the up arrow. And we're going to set that to the curve as well. And there you are. It just immediately deforms along the curve and fits the curve length, such as if we grab our curve, hit tab, go into edit mode, extrude it. It'll automatically add new segments as the length reaches necessary amount. Now, one thing you will notice is sometimes you can see here, you get a little distortion, and that's just something you kind of have to find ways to compensate for when using a curve modifier. Generally, you can do it, if you add in extra segments to cleaning up the curve itself. Whatever you need to do, you can generally do enough tweaking to get it to work well. It's just a matter of kind of playing with it. But there you have it. That is modeling and a set of Christmas lights. But I actually want to go ahead and do one more thing on this, and that is to show you how to add a end and start cap, such as each of the plugs. And so real quick, let's just go over to another layer. We'll just hit 2, and we're going to we're going to go back over to layer 1, select our original object, hit tab to go into edit mode, and we want to select these vertices here. And we're going to hit Shift D and P to separate the selection. And then we'll grab that selection, and let's go ahead and hit M and 2, or move it over to layer 2. Because what we're then going to do is also delete this array or the curve and the array modifier, like that. And we're going to model the plugs. And so first off, let's just extrude a small amount of wire from this. And then we'll select everything and hit Set Smooth. It's around here somewhere. There it is. Shading Smooth and Control N. And let's go ahead and select this portion, and we'll hit Shift S, cursor to selection. And we'll hit spacebar to add a cube. We'll type in cube, add cube. scale it down to approximately the size of the plug, and maybe scale down a little along the z-axis as well. And then we're going to go in and add a series of controlling loops to add sharpness to this. So we'll just add 2 loops, 2 loops, and you notice I'm just scaling along the y-axis and the x-axis just to move those up. Add 2 from the front as well. So now we have 7 vertices on each corner with which to create a very nice sharp edge. Okay, and we're just going to model a simple plug. I don't remember exactly what they look like, even though I just actually looked at them at the store. So we're just going to model something kind of from memory. It doesn't have to be exact. And so I'm just going to select this end, hit E to extrude, Y or X, pull it out, and let's just scale that down to create a kind of a softer edge on that. And then on this side, we're going to add in 2 loops, scale them along the x-axis and pull them in. And then we're going to extrude those and hit S and Shift X to exclude scaling along the x-axis to just scale this straight up. And then we'll add in 2 more loops to sharpen it. And go in and add another loop there to sharpen that. And in this case, I actually like this flowing curve that we're getting here, so I'm going to just leave that. And then we're going to add in another cube, which we're going to scale way down and scale along the y-axis and then the z-axis. And this is going to be our prongs for the plug. We'll just move this over. And, you know, again, I'm not making this real exact, for one, because I don't want to make this a really long tutorial. But also just because in most cases this isn't going to be needed. You know, obviously if you were doing a close-up shot, I would highly recommend that you make this very accurate. But for the sake of the tutorial, we're not going to worry about that. So now that I have one, I'm going to go ahead and hit period on my keyboard, and you'll notice that my cursor is still centered along the x-axis, which point I can just hit Shift D, scale -1, or scale along the y-axis -1, and just flip that across. And so now I have a basic plug. And then we're actually going to select it, hit Shift D, right click, and hide. And then I'm going to reselect this one. And first off, we'll go ahead and select everything and hit smooth. And I'm going to just go ahead and select these 2. Actually, no. We're going to select these 2 edges. And let's go ahead and turn on snapping. And we're going to do snapping to to an edge. And then I'm going to hit G and grab along the x-axis and snap to this edge here. Just bring them right into that surface. And then we'll just select everything else. And we're going to scale along first off, I need to hit comma on my keyboard. And then I'm going to scale along the x to -1, and then just pull this in, like that. And what that's done is created an inside, I basically just flipped it around. But now I can go in, I'm going to go to face mode, and select this face, hit X, and delete faces. Then go back to vertice mode, and then we're just going to fill in each of these areas. And in this case, we may actually be able to do this automatically. Since it's a perfectly flat surface, we don't need to worry too much about triangles. So if we just hit Shift F, you can see, honestly, that looks flat out terrible. Really not even acceptable. So first off, let's just Alt right click, and we're going to extrude and scale that up a little bit, and then scale it further along the y-axis. We'll do the same thing over here. And the reason that I'm scaling a little further along the y-axis is just that since this is not a perfectly square form, when you scale it, it scales a lot further, or visually further, along the up and down axis, the z-axis, such that you don't get an even offset here. And so now what we're going to do is just going to select these areas. We'll maybe select first these 2, fill the face. And in this case, again, since it's a flat surface, we don't need to worry about triangles. Need to be sure that we select the correct one, which you can see that in this one, I did not. Okay, and we're just going to do these one by one. And I'm actually not sure why we're getting this distortion here, but we're going to see what happens once we go ahead and finish off all of these faces. We'll go back in and do cleanup work if we need to. I believe it's actually just a problem with the normals, but I'm not going to quote myself on that just yet. There we are, almost done here. Okay, and then we'll fill the inside areas. And let's hit everything and Control N. And there you are, it was an issue with the normals. Okay, so then at this point, if you wish, you can go ahead and add in some more controlling loops, scale those up, whatever you need to do to kind of sharpen up those areas. But really at this point, we're not going to worry about that too much. Because again, this is just a small detail, and more than anything, this is a demonstration. And so we're just going to leave that as is. So we're going to hit Alt-H to unhide this, and let's go ahead and name these objects. So this is going to be, this will be the female plug, and then the male plug. Okay, and let's go back over to Layer 1, and let's apply these. So first off, let's select our object, and you'll notice, for one, I have two different arrays on, which is not correct. I should not have multiple arrays. And so let's go ahead and... Oh, I have two different curves, so we're going to delete that curve modifier and apply this one. There we are. Okay, we can toggle that down, retoggle our array up, and we want our start cap to be our male plug, and the end cap to be the female plug. And things go berserk. Okay, first off, let's go ahead and show both layers, and we want to move each of these back to their origin point. So I'm going to select this, hit Control A, apply location, and this one, and apply location. And now you will notice that one of them is semi-working. I'm going to select everything, Control N there. Okay. And let's go ahead and turn our subsurf down to level 1 on these. Just make sure it stays nice and speedy. And I'm going to select everything, and we're just going to pull it right in to the origin point. Same thing here. Turn off my snapping, it's messing me up. Okay, and Control A, and we can do the same thing there. And now we need to just see what's going on in terms of the other plugs. So you can see right now that the plugs are not lining up with the end caps here. You also notice that, that they're not lining up with the end of our wires. You also notice that this one here is flipped. And so what we need to do is to actually move these and apply their location such that the array knows where they are. So let's first select our object, and we're first just going to turn off the curve while in edit mode, and we're also going to turn off while in object mode, and the same thing with the array, just so that we have our base object without any deformation. Now I want to first select the male plug, and we're going to hit G and X to move it right over to the end of the right side. Now this seems a little backwards, and I admit it was a little backwards to me as well, in that it seems like we ought to move it over to this side such that these edges connect. Well, instead, you move it over to the right side at the base of the first array, is my best guess, such that Blender knows where it is in relation to the first one and can then apply it as needed. And so we just need to move it over and line up this edge here, which in this case it's already basically done. And then we just need to grab the other one and do the opposite of that. So we'll line it up approximately. And we also need to rotate it around the y-axis 180 degrees since it was flipped before. And so we want to line up this edge with this edge since that's where it's going to connect. So we'll just do that and that. And then we're going to hit Control A, apply the location, apply the location. Actually, on this one, we need to apply the rotation as well. And then let's go back to our array object and turn that on, and our curve. And you can see that it's actually working pretty darn well, except on this one here, in that it's not rotated correctly. And so what we can do is let's just grab that, and we're going to rotate it around the x-axis, say 90 degrees, or actually 180 degrees. So we're going to hit apply rotation. And I actually rotated it too far, it would seem, so we're going to do again 90 degrees, apply the rotation. And it's not wanting to work. Oh, and that's actually because I'm being an idiot and I'm rotating the wrong one. Rotate that back. There we are. It helps if you rotate the right object. So we'll rotate this one along the x-axis 90 degrees, hit apply rotation, and there we go. You'll notice that they're automatically merging as well, and everything is pretty much good to go. You'll also notice that if we grab our curve and go into edit mode, extrude it out, it adjusts the end cap based on the start and the end. And so this allows you to create an entire plug or an entire light strand with a single curve and a single array and never have to adjust it past that basically. Now we can actually, I'm actually going to hopefully demonstrate something real quick, and that is to adjust the twist on our objects, which actually you may no longer be able to do in 2.5 for the time being. So I'm not going to show that, but what you could do before and what will be back in 2.5 at some point or another is to be able to adjust the twist or the normal of the curve at any one point. So you could actually kind of rotate these around to make a little more variation on them. It may just be that I'm not familiar with what I'm doing enough to know how to twist that in 2.5, but regardless, you can do it in 2.49, and the hotkey for that is T. So you would select a curve, hit T, and would then rotate around. But that's that. That's creating an entire Christmas light strand in Blender 2.5. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Again, obviously, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit me up on email or on Blender Cookie. And one thing that I did just notice is that my plugs are way too small. So I'm just going to real quick, I'm going to go in, I'm going to hit Alt-H, going to select them. I can't leave it at that. And so we're going to scale this way up and do this, hit Control-A, apply location, do the same thing over here, being sure not to scale up the wires. And we'll just move it over just to adjust the scale the same. Control-A, there we go. That was bugging me there for a second. So yeah, that's that. That's creating a Christmas light strand in Blender 2.5. Again, this is Jonathan Williamson from BlenderCookie.com, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I will see you again next time.